The day I fell, the sound that stayed with me wasn't the crack of my knee against the concrete or the sharp gasp that left my chest. It was laughter. Loud, careless, echoing laughter that bounced off glass walls and polished floors. Laughter that made something inside me collapse far more painfully than my body ever could. It happened in the lobby of Westbridge Solutions, the kind of place where everything smelled like money and confidence. Marble floors, steel and glass everywhere. People who walked fast and spoke faster. I had practiced my posture for weeks, my smile, my answers to imaginary interview questions while standing in front of my bathroom mirror. I told myself I belonged there, even if my bank account and borrowed blazer said otherwise. I was late. The bus had stalled 3 blocks away, and I'd run the rest of the distance in heels I couldn't afford but thought I needed. My foot slipped on the slick floor just as the elevator doors opened. One moment I was upright, clutching my resume folder like it was a lifeline. The next, I was on the ground, papers scattering like embarrassed birds. The silence lasted half a second. Then the laughter came. A group of young professionals stepped out of the elevator. Perfect hair, tailored suits, phones in hand. One of them actually bent forward, laughing so hard he had to brace himself against the wall. A woman covered her mouth, eyes bright with amusement, not concern. Someone muttered, "Guess she didn't get the memo about walking before running." I felt heat crawl up my neck, into my face, burning away whatever dignity I had left. My knee throbbed, my palms stung, but I forced myself to stand. I wanted to disappear, but instead I gathered my papers with shaking hands while they watched like I was entertainment between meetings. That was when I saw him. Ethan Caldwell. Even if I hadn't recognized his face from the company website, I would have known him by the way people subtly straightened when he stepped forward. He was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed, relaxed in that dangerous way people with power often are. He looked at me, then at the papers in my hands, then back at my face. "Well," he said, his voice smooth and loud enough for everyone to hear, "first impressions matter." The laughter doubled. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes, sir." He smiled, not kindly. "Reception will let you know if we're still interested." He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't offer a hand. He turned and walked away, already bored. I left the building without the interview. Outside, I sat on the cold steps and cried until my chest hurt. I cried for the fall, for the laughter, for the eviction notice folded in my bag, for my mother's tired voice on the phone the night before asking if I'd found work yet. I cried because I had done everything right, or so I thought, and still ended up flat on the floor while people like Ethan Caldwell laughed. That night, something shifted. Not hope, not strength. Something darker, quieter. I told myself I wouldn't forget the sound of that laughter, and I didn't. Months passed. I took a job at a rundown marketing firm that paid just enough to keep the lights on. I worked late. I learned fast. I listened more than I spoke. While others chased credit, I chased understanding. Systems, patterns, people. Westbridge Solutions kept coming up in industry conversations. They were expanding aggressively, swallowing smaller firms, making bold promises to investors. Ethan Caldwell's name appeared in articles praising his visionary leadership and unshakable confidence. Every time I saw his face, my knee seemed to ache again. I didn't plan revenge at first. I planned survival. But survival has a way of sharpening into something else when you remember how it felt to be laughed at when you were already bleeding. One night, while cross-checking campaign metrics for a client, I noticed something odd. Numbers that didn't align. Performance reports that looked too clean, too perfect. I dug deeper, curiosity buzzing under my skin. The trail led indirectly to Westbridge. Inflated results, strategic omissions, nothing outright illegal at first glance, but enough smoke to suggest fire. I saved copies, quietly. Over the next year, I moved jobs twice. Each step took me closer to the kind of rooms where decisions were made behind closed doors. I learned how executives spoke when cameras were off, how assistants knew more than their bosses realized, how ego often created the very cracks it tried to hide. Eventually, I landed at a consulting firm that partnered directly with Westbridge. The first time I walked back into that marble lobby, my heart pounded, but my steps were steady. I wore flats this time. Confidence fit me better than heels ever had. Ethan didn't recognize me at first. Why would he? People like him never remember the ones they step over. But I recognized him instantly. Same smile, same voice, same habit of talking while others listened. I watched, I waited. And I collected. Emails forwarded by accident. Late-night conversations overheard outside conference rooms. Financial reports revised just enough to change the story. None of it explosive on its own. Together, it painted a picture of a company built on image more than truth, and a CEO who believed himself untouchable. The deeper I went, the clearer my purpose became. This wasn't about embarrassing him the way he embarrassed me. This was about making him feel the ground disappear beneath his feet. The opportunity came faster than I expected. Westbridge announced a major public offering. Media attention exploded. Investors lined up. Ethan was everywhere: panels, interviews, glossy magazine covers. He spoke about integrity, transparency, resilience. Every word felt like a personal insult. Behind the scenes, pressure mounted. Numbers had to look perfect. Timelines tightened. Corners were cut. That's when they made their biggest mistake. They underestimated me. During a late review session, I was asked to compile final data sets for external auditors. It was routine, boring, trusted work, exactly where I needed to be. I included everything they told me to include and nothing they told me not to. The discrepancies surfaced immediately. Questions followed, then meetings, then panic. Ethan's tone changed. The smooth confidence cracked, replaced by sharp impatience. I watched him snap at people who had once laughed at my fall. I watched fear flicker in his eyes for the first time when he realized this wasn't something he could charm away. When the story broke, it didn't explode. It leaked. A quiet article questioning Westbridge's growth metrics. A follow-up suggesting deeper issues. Analysts began pulling back. Investors hesitated. The stock wavered. Internally, chaos reigned. Ethan called an emergency meeting. I sat at the table, calm, attentive, invisible in the way I had learned to be. He spoke about loyalty, about weathering storms together, about enemies who wanted to see them fail. He never once looked at me. By the time regulators announced a formal investigation, the laughter was gone. What followed was slow and brutal. Deals collapsed. Partners distanced themselves. Executives resigned to protect their own reputations. Ethan's name, once praised, became cautious to mention. Then came the hearing. I watched it live, sitting alone in my apartment, lights off, laptop glowing. Ethan sat stiffly, jaw clenched, answering questions that stripped away his certainty layer by layer. The evidence spoke calmly, relentlessly. Documents, emails, timelines. Truth doesn't need to raise its voice. When the decision was announced, I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just breathed, deep and steady, like someone who had finally stood up after a long fall. Weeks later, I ran into him again. Not in a marble lobby, not surrounded by admirers. It was raining, a small cafe near my office. I almost didn't recognize him without the tailored suit, without the entourage. He looked smaller, tired, human in a way power had once protected him from. Our eyes met. Recognition flickered. He frowned. "Do I know you?" I smiled, gently. "You once told me first impressions matter." His face drained of color. For a moment, I thought he might laugh, dismiss it, cling to the version of himself that never lost. Instead, his shoulders slumped. He looked away out the window at people passing by without noticing him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I stood. "You don't have to explain." I left him there, alone with the silence. The world didn't clap when I rose. There were no headlines about me, no public vindication, but every step I took felt solid beneath my feet. They had laughed when I fell. They cried when they lost everything they thought made them untouchable. And I walked on, no longer invisible, no longer afraid of the ground. knowing that sometimes the deepest revenge isn't destroying someone loudly. It's letting the truth stand while you rise quietly beyond their reach.